Folks, one of the things I love about YouTube world as I'm getting introduced to more and more content creators, one that I've talked about before and likely we'll talk about again is George Gammon. He has an amazing channel, almost 500 subscribers. He put out a video yesterday about a 50% housing crash, and about a dozen people now have sent me that link to react to. So I've asked Millennial Mike to watch it, chop it up so we can talk about it. So, buddy, thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so George Gammon's an extremely popular content creator, economist on YouTube, and he has a lot of fans and supporters backing him in his rebel capitalist movement. And yeah, he talked about a 50% decline in housing prices, so that probably generated some clicks. He made a few different really good points. We're going to take them one at a time as they appeared throughout the video. So they're in no particular order other than that's exactly what he talked about. So we're going to start first with Jerome Powell and his legacy. Mike, you ready?
I am. This should be good.
In fact, I want you to put yourself in his shoes for a moment. Would you rather be remembered as Arthur Burns or as Paul Volcker? It's an easy question. Every single one of you most likely said, well, Paul Volcker. Why? Because history remembers him as having the guts, the huevos, to break the back of inflation. And by the way, in the wake of him breaking the back of inflation, he caused a huge economic recession. But he was willing to sacrifice the economy in order to do what is right over the long term.
All right, Mike, what do you think?
I think he's absolutely 1000% correct. In fact, you heard me make that same statement over a year ago. When interest rates were a quarter or a half, I let people know that I believe Jerome Powell was on a mission to break the Fed put. I believe he was on a mission to be Paul Volcker 2.0. A lot of people didn't believe me, years ago when I made those statements. I'm glad other content creators are coming around to that idea because I think it is that important. I think Jerome Powell is playing for his legacy and, frankly, his grandchildren. He wants his grandchildren, which may not even be born yet, to remember that granddad did his job. I believe it is that important to Jerome Powell. It is his legacy. He doesn't want to be known as Arthur Burns. Right now, and I said this a year ago, Jerome Powell history book, Mr. Transitory, complete and utter failure. Mm-hmm. He got another term. He wants to break inflation. It is that important. And I don't think he blinks. So I agree 1000% with George. In fact, said it a year ago.
So I have one follow-up question because you've talked many times about how Jerome Powell is going to be the most hated man in America. And recently he was interviewed up on the Hill by some politicians, and they were going in hard at him. Do you think that he would cave to that or potentially be fired?
So no and no. I don't think, I'm going to give you a great example, right? So we're doing this in real time. Silicon Valley Bank just blew up. We get CPI on Tuesday. We have a Fed decision 2 weeks from now. It's really funny how all this comes together. And just last week, after Jerome Powell, Jackson Hole Congress, people like BlackRock were talking about 6, and some people were talking about 6.5 terminal rate. And I'm like, guys, relax. It's not coming. He doesn't have to go that high, but I'm glad he's making you think that, because that's what he's trying to do. I think this is where this is going to, if I'm right, we're going to see in 2 weeks. So I think not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, we get the Fed rate decision. I believe most people believe the Fed will pause because of Silicon Valley Bank, what may be bank runs on Monday and Tuesday. And I believe Jerome Powell is going to walk up to the market. He's going to kick it one more time with a quarter, and then he might pause. Jerome Powell is going to go one extra meeting just to show how tough he is. And that will make him the most hated man in America.
Okay, well, that kind of leads us into our next point that George Gammon made about open market operations and how that might have changed. So let's take a look back at the video.
Step number 2 of Powell's plan to crush home prices is OMO. Open market operations? No. Actually, got to give a huge hat tip to my good buddy Peter Schiff, who rebranded this and said it in a way that's far more accurate. Instead of open market operations, he said now it should be called open mouth operations.
And as a result, just by him talking tough without even raising interest rates, he can also potentially impact consumer price inflation moving forward. And I believe he knows darn well that one of his most effective tools is simply psychology. If the market believes he's going to do something, they behave in a certain way, anticipating what he says he's going to do. Therefore, he doesn't even have to do it. Or if he does, in terms of interest rates, he doesn't have to hike them as high as he otherwise would have.
So, Mike, that's pretty much exactly what you just said. He's talking tough, but backing it up. And now he doesn't have to quite back it up as much as he did before because people are already afraid of him.
Yeah, I want to keep reiterating stuff that we've talked about on my channel for months and maybe a year. I'm trying to help people understand how all this works, right? That the economy is very complex, but you can see the threads that tie it together. And the Fed only has two tools. They have this committee meeting every 6 weeks or thereabouts, which everybody talks about. And we will endlessly talk about in 2 weeks. But the most important tool they have is their mouth and a microphone. I keep telling people, they're going to talk tough. They're going to scare you. They're going to get the folks at BlackRock to get all scared and talk about 6% terminal rate, 6.5%. They're going to talk about 10% mortgage rates. It's not coming. He's just trying to play the psychology game and get you to change your behavior so he doesn't have to go as high. That is why I have not changed my call of 5%.
5% as the terminal rate.
It's the terminal rate. It's been that for 16 months now. So
consistency. Okay, well, so he does make a final point, because remember, the point of the video he made was that real estate prices could crash by as much as 50%. So he's going to talk about real versus nominal. And more importantly, you're going to react to that and then give the advice to us, the investors, as to what we should do. So let's jump back in and take a look at his last clip.
So I think the key is to look at where home prices were adjusted for inflation. And I know a lot of you are saying to yourself right now, oh, George, that's absolutely impossible. Prices will never go back down to where they were in 2012, even when you adjust for inflation. Okay, let's go through some quick math. For those of you watching right now, would you say it's safe to assume that maybe over the next 5 years, on average, the United States sees, let's say, 10% inflation, 8%, 9%? I don't think that's too outrageous based on what we've seen over the past couple of years. And do you think it's possible that home prices are just flat in nominal terms over the next, I don't know, 5 years? Well, if home prices are flat and we have 8, 9, 10% consumer price inflation, that means home prices in real terms would come down by almost 40%.
Now, Mike, for you to break this down for us, because I don't want to say he's playing a tricky game here to make sure that his title isn't just seen as clickbait, but he's not actually saying that you're going to see the price of a $500,000 house drop to 250. What he's saying is inflation is going to devalue your dollar and things are going to kind of stagnate out. Am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in that kind of view. And again, one of the things I've been trying, again, one of my things I try to do on the channel is educate people. I've been trying to help people understand real versus nominal probably for 18 months because it's paramount. I like how George Gammon does his whiteboards, 1, 2, 3. He's a much better, more polished educator. So kudos to him. He is very good at what he does. So I'm glad he's talking real versus nominal. A couple of things. I cannot think of any housing data that's not reported on a nominal basis. Case-Shiller, NAR, NAHB, these things are, housing is not generally adjusted for inflation. Second, I don't know where he gets 10% CPI inflation for 5 years. He says it so nonchalant.
Right.
I mean, seriously, can you imagine 10% inflation for 5 years?
Yikes.
We went bananas at 9-1 for a month.
Mhm.
I mean, you're talking 60 months at 10% inflation. Freaking Jerome Powell would lose his job. So to say 10% inflation for 5 years is, almost probable, I think is intellectually dishonest. But it's certainly possible. My crystal ball is just as broken as his. So again, if you want to play this game of 10% inflation for 5 years, my biggest issue with this video after watching it one time was he didn't tell his audience what to do.
Right.
So let's play this game. You can get a house today, say at 400 grand. You can get 30-year debt at 7%. Your payment is fixed. Let's assume it barely cash flows, right? No alligators. We only do great deals, all that nonsense. However, you believe George Gammon that inflation is going to run at 8, 9, 10% for 5 years in a row. What should you do? And this is where George Gammon did his audience dirty. If you believe George Gammon is right, and I don't, but if you do, because he has a huge following, one thing I know about George Gammon audience, they passionate.
They'll come for you.
Passionate. Oh, they come for you. So again, I don't believe George. That's not I don't see. But if you do, what should you do? You should go buy real estate today. If you believe George, and that's my problem with George in this video. He should have said, I'm going to go buy some houses today. Because again, he's talking about inflation at 10%, your interest rates at 7%, you're going to get 5 years of inflation, wages are going to go up, rents are going to go up, you're going to cash flow like a monster. So if you believe George Gammon and real estate is going to crash 50% in real terms, you're a moron not to buy real estate because the debt is going to be just disappear. I have a shirt, which I created 2 years ago, the second day of the lockdown. It says, I use inflation to get rich. Ask me how. It's because I can borrow money at a cheap rate, cash flow a day, and let inflation eat away the debt. So in response, I wish George would do this. I wish he would have said, if you believe me, all of you should go buy a house. And he didn't because, of course, I don't think he really believes inflation will be 10% for 5 years. But again, I want to be very clear. That's not my base case. But if you believe George Gammon and you are a passionate follower of rebel capitalists and you think we will have 5 years of inflation at 10%, you are a fool not to buy a property. That's just how math works.
Yeah, I agree. I have this 1985 $100 bill right here. I don't know if you can tell how old that is. 1985. And I think about it when I look at it sometimes, man, I wish I could have bought assets back in 1985, but unfortunately I was negative 6 years old. So that wasn't going to work out for me. But if you believe what he's saying, essentially he's saying you have the opportunity to right now lock in a fixed rate payment at $2023. And 5 years from now in $2028, those dollars will have been inflated to the point where you're just getting more and more of them, but you're fixed with your payment in 2023. So it just gets easier and easier to handle the 2023 debt as the cash flow, the money that gets kicked off by your asset that you purchased just increases as rents go up and more rent comes in. You have more and more of these new lower value dollars to attack that 2023 debt problem. So yeah, I agree with
so
your point
again,
exactly.
The other thing that's really crazy is, right, if inflation is going up 10% a year and 42% of inflation is owner's equivalent rent or housing, your rent's going to go up, I don't know, compounded 60%. So if you're renting for $3,000 today, it'll be $4,800. Is that right?
God.
Yeah, $4,800. So you're going to make, you're going to make an extra 18, well, taxes, insurance. So maybe you make an extra $1,300. That doesn't suck.
Right.
So again, I think George Gammon, I love his 1, 2, 3. I think he has a passionate audience, but I think George missed the closing element. If you believe me, everyone at Rebel Capitalist, you should go buy a home today. That's what he was saying.
Yeah.
Let inflation be your friend.
Well, I'm a big fan of George Gammon. I watch a lot of his
too.
stuff. I do like the Rebel Capitalist movement. I think that you're right. A lot of times, the only issue that I do see with his content, which is very educational, is that it's almost always a description of the problem, but not a prescription for the solution.
Yeah, I mean, if you believe the analysis, which again he's so articulate and so well done, I just wish he closed with, "Hey, if this is the pain or the opportunity, this is what you should do." Now I know why he doesn't do it, but he should take a shot.
Well, Mike, that was the George Gammon video. Everything we have for you today. I appreciate you having me on the channel.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you again. Folks, if you want to be a part of this, you want us to react to videos, just DM Millennial Mike so I have no heads up. There was a commenter last time that says they think I'm prepped or something, which is ludicrous. But if you want to make sure I'm not prepped, and just DM them on Instagram, Millennial Mike. Thanks, bud.